I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered. My life is my own.
Oh, I have all these boxes of records here, and today I'm going to make my best attempts to put them up here on these shelves, because I can. So let's do it. Hello friends, it's Carpo from the UK here. Now my UK accent's horrible, and I'm not from the UK, I'm from the US of course, but this discussion is going to be about music that is from the UK. And before I made this I was thinking about how I don't think enough, UK gets enough credit for some of the music that came out of Europe, but anyhow, in particular I'm a big fan of music. Most of my subscribers know this. But I wanted to make a video specifically talking about Pink Floyd. I made a post yesterday asking people, what do you think is the best recorded album of all time? And I got a variety of answers, but the one that seems to come up most often is DSOTM, or Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. Now, while I find Dark Side of the Moon to be a phenomenally recorded album, there's a few shortcomings on it. One is the song Money, and as I was talking with my son and my wife about this, they're like, well, but that's part of the whole story. I'm like, I know, but I think it's the overplayedness of it that made that song, made me roll my eyes and want to skip it. But the whole album is really fantastic. I think it's a great album. But what we're talking about is not just how an album was recorded and what tracks they used, what master tape they used, or it's more than just the hardware used and the quality of the recording itself. You have to like the music. I have plenty of music that's recorded onto records that is phenomenal. Analog recordings, but the music doesn't move me, so therefore it's not going to sound as good. And likewise, I have a lot of modern music that is on LPs that is probably digital to analog, where therefore you're losing a lot of the info anyway, and it still sounds phenomenal to me. I did make a video about records. I don't think I've uploaded it yet, but it's talking about the difference between vinyl and CDs and why vinyl is superior to many people, but it's kind of blown out of proportion. There's much more to vinyl than just the sound. It's the nostalgia, even the clicks and the pops in the album cover. So, I've already rambled enough. I want to talk about first a few albums that people might think of as high quality. I have my whole stack of Pink Floyd records. I'm going to go through them and I'm going to lay out my thoughts on each one. But there's plenty of albums like Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms, phenomenal album. I mean, all Dire Straits albums are great. This, Asia by Steely Dan, is considered to be one of the best recorded albums of all time. Some people say it is the best recorded album. Others say, oh, it's not even in the top 10. It's very kind of poppy. It was the introduction to yacht rock. Some people, this is considered one of the 10 must-have, or top 8 must-have albums of the 1970s. And I would definitely agree. But if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I might not. I didn't know the album well enough. If you get into the modern day, we have, things like Low Level Owl by Appleseed Cast. Most people have never heard of that, but it's recorded from 24-inch master tape, or, what does it say on here? 24-track, 2-inch platinum studio master audio tape. Recorded straight onto vinyl, and it does make a difference. There's a little note in here about how they recorded the leaves blowing outside the studio during a windy day. They were kind of blowing around in the entrance on the concrete. And they just took the microphones out and recorded that. It's on there, and you can hear it. It sounds like you're actually outside with those leaves. I'm not going to go into the detail of audio quality and lossless formats and MP3s and how much you lose, but I want to stick mostly to the Floyd, but like The Moon in Antarctica by Modest Mouse, phenomenal album. Spangle, Codex, phenomenal modern album. And then we have things like this, which are to give you a point of reference here. This is a San Francisco limited edition direct-to-disc recording. And what that means is that they took a band into the studio and they recorded live directly onto LP, onto the master, and then pressed LPs from it. Now, it sounds really good. It's not really my type of music. I'm not that interested in it, but it gives you a point of reference to buy a direct-to-disc recording to see what a true analog sound sounds like. And this means the music is literally cutting the vinyl out of, live music, not playing a tape through it. How much do you really lose in compression? How much do you really lose when you're editing and changing things? It's up to the individual, and most people, like I say, listen to their stuff through headphones or a crappy stereo. I've got big old speakers and I want to hear every nuance, every sound. These albums were put out back in the 70s and 80s. This is the... sounds like somebody's having fun on a video game. A Sound Odyssey by Realistic. It's a direct-to-disc, special limited, custom recorded, exclusive for Radio Shack. And it actually has a Star Wars theme on here, which is pretty good, and Shaft as well. But it's all done very jazzy. It's all done in the studio. So there's an example of some of the albums that would be considered, high quality. But, so we move on to Pink Floyd. Going through these. For example, this came out. This is More from the soundtrack that Pink Floyd came out with this one. And sounds like somebody's fighting in there. The second one that came out was, or that I want to share, not that came out, for example, is Umaguma. Now, let me say that when I was young, back in the early 1990s, around 1990, and I first tried psychedelics, I found Pink Floyd. And I fell in love. Umaguma is a phenomenal album. It was one of the first and the only ones I had, along with Metal, which I'll get to, and Saucer Full of Secrets, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. These old Pink Floyd. And when you're tripping, they sound crazy. They sound wild. And this album, Umaguma, has one live LP and then one studio LP. And it's pretty good. It's decent, but it's old. It's from the 60s, I believe, right? Yeah. Anyhow. Then we move on, and I'm trying to do this in somewhat an order that makes sense to me, not necessarily when they were released. But this album right here, Atom Heart Mother, is a very, very simple, basic album. Most people, I don't mean basic in the music itself, it's well known, but it's not as well noted and revered. This album, I've seen it personally put people into a crazy bad trip and headspace. It is very creepy, very dark, and very a phenomenal album to listen to by Pink Floyd. Then we get into Metal. Metal was one of the earliest albums I had on here, and it has Saint-Tropez and Fearless. Fearless is an awesome song, but Echoes is probably one of the most well-known tunes on this album that I remember from back in 1990, and I was like, holy crap, this song is amazing. And that was through my single speaker crappy stereo system that I had. Nowadays, with 6-7 speakers and a full, a perfect room to listen to it in, this album resonates with me heavily. Wish You Were Here is an absolutely awesome album, and some people say that they believe this is their favorite album ever. Actually, this album is by, I believe, Gilmour and Roger Waters considered their favorite album they ever produced, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it's okay. It's not my top favorite, but the recording quality is amazing. Now we get to my love here. This is Animals by Pink Floyd. This album is probably in my top 5 albums. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, the whole story. It was based on George Orwell's Animal Farm. So it has dogs, pigs, and sheep. The dogs are the businessmen. The pigs are the dogs, yeah. The pigs are the politicians and the sheep are the people, right? And it tells a story. Now, there's a controversy surrounding this album. I guess apparently Roger Waters wanted to take full credit and take over on the whole thing like he always did. He was very domineering, and a lot of people think he's a complete asshole. And I realize that you have to be somewhat of an asshole to be a lead guy in a band. It's just how it is. If you want to make things work. If you're telling a story, that's what has to happen. And that's exactly what happened in this album, The Wall, which everyone who's a Pink Floyd fan or not knows The Wall. This album is perhaps my favorite album of all time. A double LP with a complete story to tell about self-isolation after fame, a disconnect from people around you, and breaking down that wall and rebuilding yourself. This album, the recording quality is absolutely epic. It sounds so good. I mean, but you have to listen to it through a good stereo. I'm not going to say that vinyl is imperative. I have this Pink Floyd CD set right here, which has, like all their most of their albums, the good ones, in, the highest quality format that a CD can provide. But there's just something about listening to it on a record. Then we have Dark Side of the Moon, which is probably the most well-known Pink Floyd album of all time. And I'd like to make a note of why I believe this album is fantastic, by the way. As I mentioned, I'm not a fan of the song Money, but it is part of the story. The reason why Animals, I don't think, is as well known or revered in the sound quality sphere is because it really got no radio play. None of the songs were ever popular. It was that album that didn't make the charts, didn't make the radios, and still that album, it endures as has this legacy of a story about how fucked up society really is. Pardon my language. I think Dark Side of the Moon is a fantastic album. If I had to choose two Pink Floyd albums to have forever, it would be The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon in that order. But they tried other experiments. David Gilmour, I believe, tried to carry the Pink Floyd name. For example, we have the Momentary Lapse of Reason right here. And this one was, I don't recall the year this one came out. It was 90 or 80, 87. Yeah. This was one of the last real albums they came out with until The Division Bell, which came out in 94. I believe that was the one that, I don't know, once a band hits a certain point, it's like, all right, they've put out their best stuff. And then there's, of course, the great collection of dance songs, which is just a variety of different Pink Floyd album songs. Then we have David Gilmour, his solo album that he made his best attempt to release. Then we have this, which I believe is Roger Waters. What's it called? There's no title on here. KSOM or something. Oh yeah, it's Roger Waters, Radio Chaos. And I've listened to it. I've tried it. It's not my thing. To be honest, Roger Waters' stuff is just kind of blah a lot of the time. It's not about one guy. It's about the band. It's about how they work together and that interaction. If I were going to recommend one Pink Floyd album to get, of course it would be The Wall or Dark Side of the Moon. However, this is also a really good option if something like this, which I got years ago for Christmas. It's Echoes by Pink Floyd, which is basically a box set of 4 albums. It's got, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, as well as Astronomy Domine, Echoes, Hey You, and it's all done in kind of an interesting order. So you can listen to this and get a full, variety of... You probably can't get that one anymore for the price it came out for. I'm sure it's probably a collector's item or something now, but as I said, all of these albums are fantastic, but The Wall stands out for me, and the movie, of course, is phenomenal, but I like The Wall before the movie, and it's not because of the movie that I like the album, but it definitely did help as I was younger and I first saw it. But Animals, the song Sheep is just phenomenal. It's such a moving tale of stupidity. harmlessly passing your time in the grassland away. You know, you better watch out, there may be dogs about. And it's warning the sheeple, if you will, against the predators in this world. But it is so well done and put together. Sometimes it takes a stroke of genius from one man, and that man might be Roger Waters, and perhaps he is a dick sometimes. But I'm so damn grateful he came up with these albums, you know, that he was able to produce them. But at the same time, I realized that the rest of the band played a huge role in how they sound. I think Pink Floyd is phenomenal. Do they have the best recordings ever? I don't know. But I think that there's a nostalgia that's involved in that. But there's something to be said about the quality of the records, too. I have my whole Grateful Dead collection over here. There's not one Grateful Dead studio album that moves me. It's live Grateful Dead that I love. None of the studio albums move me even close to the way that Pink Floyd did, because they probably were more interested in the live stuff. Floyd, they managed to make a legacy out of some really amazing songs. And if you haven't ever listened to The Wall in its entirety, I would urge you to sit down with good headphones or a good stereo, close your eyes, put the whole album on, and listen to every word from the beginning to end. Even sit there with the lyrics and the inserts, and because it's an experience a lot of us can relate to. And the beauty is that it brings and conjoins two aspects of music that are important. One, the meaning behind the music, that there's a purpose. And number two, the quality of the musicians that are playing that music. I guess there's three, because the third one would be combined with putting that onto an actual album and having a good studio. There's plenty of great musicians out there that just have shitty instruments and shitty gear. There's plenty of great musicians with phenomenal gear that just don't have good recording capabilities. And then there's plenty of musicians out there with endless money. They can't play for shit, and they've got the best recording equipment and all the money, but they just can't produce a good album because they suck. And there's plenty of bands that suck, and a lot of them today. You know, the reason why a lot of this is lost is not just because of time as far as people have changed in their music preferences. It was the Loudness Wars that of the 90s and 2000s, where basically every producer was trying to crank up all the levels to past peak and allowing clipping and everything, just cut off a lot of the music, make it as loud as possible in every channel, whereas back then there were more nuances and subtleties within the music. But that's coming back. A lot more people are starting to understand the value of analog. You get listener fatigue if you listen to an MP3 for too long. It's just like cringy. But if you put a record on, there's a certain warmth that you can't define in words. But I don't get that fatigue. I can listen to records forever. So those are my thoughts on Pink Floyd and records in general. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you all next time. Peace out. Well, hey there, everybody. I hope you're doing well today. My name is Carpo, and I am a music lover. I'll stop short of calling myself an audiophile. Now, the term audiophile tends to, by definition, means you love audio, you love music, usually, but what it really tends to mean is that you love the sound of the music itself. So audiophiles tend to be more focused on the music rather than or more focused on the dynamic range and the specifics of the music than the music itself, which is fine. But I am not an audiophile by definition. I am a record lover, a vinyl lover, and I wouldn't say I'm a fanatic, but there was definitely a time when I started collecting records, and I never stopped. I got my first records back in '85. Records were on the way out, and tapes were pretty popular, but I still remember having my Twisted Sister records and some REO Speedwagon I picked up somewhere. Wasn't my thing. But over the years, we switched to CD. They swore that the formats would end, these old, worn out, outdated formats, but I still loved the sound of a record. Many people did, and turntables were always somewhat popular. It wasn't until the 2000s when they really came back in. Well, I started collecting records around the year 2000. And I remember going to a Modest Mouse concert and picking up their very first album. Long Drive is what it's called. Long Drive with Nothing to Think About. For like, you know, 10, 15 bucks. Today it's worth like $400 because back then people weren't collecting vinyl yet. So I'm not really here to talk about collecting vinyl as much as whether LPs really sound better or not. And, you know, there's a huge debate on this issue, naturally. And I have, over here, I'm listening to, right now, this is what kind of inspired me. I'm sitting here listening to Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. And, you know, I've got my little music station set up. This is my Yamaha turntable that I use. And this is the album cover, which you can open up and you can look and read the inserts and the lyrics. And even over here, I've got these CDs, the CD collection of most of the Pink Floyd stuff, and they're great. You know, I love listening to CDs, especially when you don't want to go to the trouble to set up the records. And one of those times might be when you're at a party and you don't want to deal with it. I mean, buying CD changers originally in the 90s was amazing. I mean, wow, it would actually play 5 different CDs on random. That was something very epic for the time. So let me talk about LPs as quickly as I can and give you the information you might need to decide whether LPs are for you. First of all, what really matters with records is the source material. So I could buy a old Jimi Hendrix record, let's say, or I could even buy a Jimi Hendrix, let's say, CD, and the quality would probably still sound better on a stereo than any modern LP. And the reason is because source material is key. A lot of the times they would take a master tape, a master, like 24 platinum recording audio analog tape, take it right into the studio, and then cut a master copy, which they carve these masters, and then the masters are used to press the records themselves. There's not very many people who cut those masters anymore, and it's lacquer, cutting lacquer. But the thing is, the source material is very key to the quality of your end product. And a lot of people now are taking in digital copies and having records made just for the novelty of it, but it's not the same. It's really not. You don't have that original music. And the problem is because the dynamic range is not there. Dynamic range is what makes the lows low and the highs high, and the difference between a cymbal and a drum beat, and the being able to have, especially with orchestra music, having it come in full. And digital downloads always come with a record. So let's say you want a digital copy, that's fine. You can still order the record, and almost all of them these days come with a digital download. So if in doubt, just get a record. But the dynamic range thing is important. Most people don't realize that there was a thing called the Loudness Wars that went on through the 90s and early 2000s. Well, and still was going on until recently. But basically the Loudness Wars is pushing all the levels on all the instruments as high as you possibly can and getting the very maximum out of it as far as volume, because they figured that would sell better. Well, as it turned out, that wasn't necessarily the case. And Guitar Hero, of all things, is what set that straight. I found this out doing some research. Guitar Hero, in order for them to, basically they had to remaster a lot of songs in order to make them work so that it could recognize whether people were playing with it. The reason being is because it was too noisy, it was too loud. So they had to remaster Metallica, Death Magnetic, the album, or maybe it was just the song. And a bunch of fans took note. And they didn't like it. They said, why does this sound better on Guitar Hero than it does on the CD I bought? And it's because of the Loudness Wars. It's because the producers want to make as much money as they possibly can by pushing the volume as loud as they can on everything. And most people these days listen on their phones anyway. And this is what is kind of hard to make it to talk about. Like I have over here, I've got these Bose 301s. Then I've got these RTR speakers, which are like 4.5 feet high. They've got two 12s, two mids, and two ribbon tweet or dome tweeters. Then I've got these two Bic Venturi speakers, which have an 6, or I think it's an 8. No, it's a 6. No, it's an 8-inch speaker, and then a tweeter, which have a very unique sound from these and from these. And then down here for the center, I've got an Infinity, which is the most amazing sounding center speaker I've ever heard. So, to get to the point here, I've been adjusting these over years, different speakers, different stereos, different receivers, to try to get the right sound, the one that works for me. Here's the thing I'd like to say. If you're ever sitting listening to a good stereo system, the first thing you should do to see if it's really that, if it's the ultimate sound, is just tilt your head back like this. And as your ear shape changes, you're going to lose a lot of what you think sounds good. So the point is there, if one person thinks sounds great, another person may not have the same results. So the Loudness Wars brought us a lot of competition, and this is starting to change. Compression, people are starting to get rid of compression and give more dynamic range like the old days. But it's really more than that. Turntables and records have an experience of their own. You sit there and you pull out the record, you read the inserts and the sleeves, right? Steve Jobs was he said that when he goes home at night, he listens to records. I remember reading that. And even the guy who founds iTunes and sells all this digital music listened to vinyl. A lot of people think it's kind of a snooty thing. Like, oh, well, people just think records sound better because it's all in their head. This is yes and no. It's partially true. The one thing about a turntable, especially, is no interruptions, no ads, no skipping songs or shuffle play. You put the needle on that record and you listen to that side of the record. It's a hassle to change it. But as I said earlier, even though I might put CDs on sometimes, or MP3s most of the time, when I'm tripping or take psychedelics, I always put on records. And I actually go to the trouble to change them. And a lot of the records I play are double LPs, meaning basically each side of an LP is a lot shorter than it would be back in the day. The reason being is that the thicker the vinyl and the deeper the grooves that are cut, the less you can fit on one side, but the more information you can fit in that record. And this is something that people should take note of. The more bass heavy a record is, so if it's like dubstep or super deep bass, it's going to require more grooves and therefore more deeper grooves to accommodate for that bass. They're not really, speakers don't do well with like stereo sound. I should say needles don't do well with bass on stereo sound. So there are certain limits and things that it can't do, but still the bass on a record is just epic. A low B is just, it shakes the house. But it might also shake the turntable. And the advantage I have out here is that I'm playing this record on a separate unit, and it's kind of floating on this tray, but also it's on a concrete floor because I'm in my garage. And this is why it's kind of changed the whole way I do music out here, because I can crank it up without worrying about my turntable shaking. But it's not just the vibrations that are an issue, or the dust or the scratches, which I kind of like. There's a thing called sibilance. Sibilance is when S's, as it sounds, sibilance, it's when you get a wavy, high-pitched sound. It usually comes out in S's or cymbals, when somebody crashes the cymbal. And you'll hear it on records, it'll be very wavy. But the thing is, you get a lot of sibilance on MP3s too, and it's worse, and it's not natural. And there's something called listener fatigue that you'll get if you listen to records too long, or to MP3s too long. And one thing that I really love about listening to records is there's certain types of music that do better listening to vinyl than others. Now, I wish I could play the records for you. It's always funny to me when people play a record on YouTube, like they're going to show you how their stereo sounds. And you're like, wait a minute, dude, this is going from your speakers through a single microphone and then being put out and, onto YouTube. It's a horrible way to share things. It's kind of like when you share personal videos from your phone, they always come out really crappy for the other person. You get it. But anyway, there are certain types of music that sound amazing. There are certain albums that are epic and considered the very best recordings of all time. And that's very subjective. But as I was saying, Pink Floyd over there, that's definitely one of them. Dark Side of the Moon is a great album, but I actually prefer The Wall in its entirety. And I could sit back with my eyes closed and listen to that album, and it is something amazing. The quality that was put into that, in the story and the recording itself, is epic. But the idea that it was recorded straight from tape and cut onto lacquer and pressed into records means that you're getting the original intention of the artist. And that is what's lost in the modern day with a lot of the crappy MP3s that come out. Most of the pop music you hear, whether it's on the radio or elsewhere, is, digital these days. And there was a time when the DJs laid down vinyl. It was an interesting time because nobody appreciated it for what it was at the time. But the reason why, 45s, singles, as far as records, they have more information on them because they go at a faster speed. So they're covering more ground at once, therefore they can actually sound clearer and better. That's another thing to take note of. But acoustic guitars tend to sound absolutely amazing on records. It looks like we're almost to the end of side 2 on Dark Side of the Moon. As I said earlier, more bass is difficult to navigate for the needle, but it does require more grooves. A lot of the records I have are double LPs. I've got some of my, favorite records up here, but they're thick. These are 180 gram vinyl, and it's a hefty group of records. Sometimes you'll see old LPs from the 70s, 60s that are on really thin vinyl, and they try to cram like 45 minutes to an hour onto one record, and it just doesn't work. The funny thing that folks don't know is the very first, well, some don't. I would imagine most people don't know this, but the first half of the record has better quality sound, and that has to do with how much more ground that the needle can cover. It's the way that they're designed. This is why people make double records, to make sure that all of the information is preserved. What else do I have here? There's one thing I've noticed is that colored LPs tend to have more issues. They tend to have, there's something weird, like especially picture records, where they have a picture disc where it has a picture on it. However they press it and however they do that, there's a lot of background noise that comes along with that. These are also noted to me on certain colored LPs, probably because of the type of vinyl used or the dyes or ingredients. They affect the way that the needle hits the record. But this is something that you realize is on all records. You're always going to get a little bit of background noise, background hiss. Even on a brand new record, you're going to get some pops and clicks. And that's okay. That's one of the greatest things about listening to records, I think, in my opinion. But beyond the nostalgia, yes, records do tend to sound better, but only if you're listening to old music or music that's recorded quality. Like this one right here. As I was saying, I should read this. This is the Appleseed Cast Low Level Owl Volumes 1 and 2 by Deep Elm Records and Graveface Records. I bought this, I think, in 2010. And I have a few copies of it, but I want to read what it says. Featuring 26 finer audio recordings on 3 discs. And then it gives the discs and the songs on them. Disc 1, Disc 2, Disc 3. And then it says, Recorded analog in October, November, and December of the year 2000 onto 24-track 2-inch platinum studio master audio tape. Location, studio entertainment provided by Red House Recording in Kansas. Goes on and on. And then there's a funny part. It says, it is recommended and preferred that you listen to these recordings with dynamic monitor, gimbal suspension headphones. High quality, low noise, high output stereophonic audio components will provide the optimal desired effect. If dizziness or faintness occurs, discontinue use. In extreme cases, or if confusion persists, consult your local physician. Do not dial emergency telephone numbers. Neither the Appleseed Cast nor Deep Elm Records nor Grapeface Records accepts any liability for damage, physical, emotional, or psychological, caused to anyone as a result of direct or indirect exposure to these recordings. So, that's probably more information than you need about one record. The point I wanted to make about it was that they put the effort into explaining that they recorded it onto platinum master tapes. They took the time to record onto tape and press it onto records. And it's so easy to go digital these days. I'm a digital guy. I record onto my little, most of the music that I write, I record it onto this little voice recorder, which is digital. And I also have a Boss or a Tascam. I think it's a Boss, like 8-track recorder. It's all digital. But another thing I do have, fortunately, is tape. I have a reel-to-reel tape recorder, audio, and I have used that for our band practice like 10 years ago. And I would set up microphones going into that thing. And it seemed really cheesy and cumbersome and pointless at the time. But when I went back and found those recordings, it was something else. And the way I see it is, if a musician is going to make a recording, and they're going to take the time to write a song, to produce it, and to release it, you better fucking demand that your stuff is released analog. Because it really does make a difference. Folks don't realize that MP3s lose 90%, up to 90% of the music. Some of the recordings are so warbly and crappy, you don't realize you're losing all the high highs and the low lows, and you're getting listener fatigue. I experience it. Maybe not everybody has that. And some people say it's all in your head, and yeah, it probably is, but most people can't tell the difference between different formats when it's presented to them side by side. However, listening long term to vinyl is much easier on my brain than listening to an MP3, especially when you have the right stereo. And I think a lot of people these days, one of the things that's really lost today is that people either have a really nice fancy stereo that's expensive, or they just have nothing, like a pair of little cheesy computer speakers or something. I urge everybody, if you're into music, to, you owe it to yourself to at least go to Goodwill or a thrift store and pick some up. Like I said, these RTRs I got, they're like 4.5 feet high. They weigh like 120 pounds each or more. They're huge. I was going to get rid of them. And then I put them out here, and the bass is amazing. I thought the subwoofer was in here, and it's not. I was like, wow. But I haven't ever had them on a concrete floor. And the point is, like I said about leaning your head back, it depends on the room, your ear shape, the room size, the sound treatments that you put on the ceilings and walls. And one thing I kind of convinced my wife to do was allow me to keep the popcorn ceiling in here. Because even though, it's this stuff, and even though it's nasty and nobody likes it, it looks tacky, and 70s like, I convinced her that the sound was worth it, to allow us not to bounce the sound around too much. So now that we have stuff in here, right, the music sounds good. It doesn't matter how good your stereo is, how good your record player is, or any of that, if you don't have the right room. And it also doesn't matter what your room's like, or any of that if you don't have the good stereo. You just have to find the happy medium that works for you. And for some people, they can listen to CDs and MP3s their whole life and be happy. For me, I think that records are not just about the music itself, as far as listening, but also that nostalgia of collecting. Fortunately, I hung out with my neighbor the other day, and he's into vinyl too, so I'm going to have him come over and have a listen at my house, and we'll have to just keep sharing back and forth, and it won't be the Loudness Wars, but, you know, the stereo sharing. It's not a war, but rather a, hey, I like to listen to music too. You know what I mean? Anyway, rambling on. I'm out. Peace. Well, what's up there, my friends and strangers, and if I have any enemies, maybe whoever's out there watching this, we can all come together on the awesome truth that records are beautiful. And in the very least, you know, a box like that Hendrix Box Set, absolutely gorgeous on the shelf, even if you don't play records. But I've been promising to do this for the last 2 years. I've had people say, could you show me your records, and what records do you have? And I love looking at vinyl personally. You know, I do have a couple of DJ tables, but honestly, this is what I use right here. It's just an old Yamaha P750. Oh man, it's dusty, because I've been remodeling. Yeah, I try to keep dust out, but it needs a cleaning. It's a Yamaha P750 automatic, so you can turn it on and off, but also, you know, it's a direct drive. It's a great little turntable. And so what I've got over here are some of my records that I'm going to share. And I'm not going to spend forever on it, because obviously I have about, besides these ones, I have about 12 boxes of records in the garage that are all sorted into 80s and 70s, you know, all these different ones. So I'm going to show you some of my favorites, starting with whatever's up here in the top. So this is actually a cool album. This is Old Canes, Feral Harmonic. Actually, it has a ribbon that came tied on. I got it signed by the guy who is the singer of the band, but I can't recall. I think his name was Chris something, but he was also involved in this record label that I bought from, that also deals with a band called Appleseed Cast. So, for example, this is Appleseed Cast, Two Conversations, but there's two different ones. I wanted to get the first and second pressing, and I'll show you why. So this one I bought years ago. Look at that thing. It's just so beautiful. Translucent, yellow, and black and red splatter. And then, a couple years later, this one came out. Now, I collected Appleseed Cast because I just love their music, and I figured I might as well pick a band I like. So this one's white splatter with yellow and black, and they're, you know, there's something special about LPs that you just can't get out of a standard CD, or especially not an MP3, obviously. The cool thing is that they always come with these little extra bonuses, things like this, like posters, you know. It's pretty neat. So I'm going to show you a couple of the Appleseed Casts, because I think that they're my favorite ones. I actually have quite a few, but I'm just going to show you some of my favorites. So that's just a black album, that's Peregrine. This is Mare Vitalis, and the album art's often very simple, but this is a double LP. I really like the label on these, and yeah, it's beautiful. I think that this one's The Moon, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, that was a different album. Anyhow, one of these is white and clear, and the other one seems to be, is it the same? No, that's a black and white. It's also a really beautiful record. Now, mind you, I don't take these out very often at all, ever, really. I don't, you know, every time you take them out, they can get dustier. But I really did want to share some of them. This one's cool. This was Into the Ring Wars. It's nothing, there's no splatter or anything, but it's just a really beautiful colored gold. And it's a really interesting album. I like their stuff. They've been around for quite a while. On that other side note, I also have these two albums, which, for example, this is Low Level Owl, volumes 1 and 2. Now, these are both 180 gram triple LPs. I bought these because they were different. They're the same album, but the first one I bought was from this series, which one's brown, one's green, and one's blue. And like natural colors. Really good album. And then one of the records rolled out of my record thing, hit the ground, and just went crack. So I ended up buying another one of the same. But then I saw that, yeah, this is, there it is. Beautiful, right? But I believe I have one more album also that I bought. It was the silver version. It's in this box back here, I think. And I took it to the show and had them sign it for me because I just love their music so much. Moving on, there's one back here I'd like to share, which is, this is cool. The band's called Dream End, and these guys are out of, I think, Kansas or something, but a lot of the ones I get are, you know, numbered. So this is 251 out of 675. But here's the big kicker. It's got this whole scene going on in here with the girl back there holding her head. Got the dying bird, the piano, the bird person back here. It's a very interesting scene. I'm not really sure what to make of it, but it's a good album. I've always enjoyed it. Over here, for example, we have Spangle. Now I just picked this up a few, well, probably a couple years ago now. And this is a triple LP. It's the coolest thing because they slide in and out of here. Like this one has the eyeball on the cover. I'm gonna pull one out and show you. Gorgeous blue. It's a really good album. I like Spangle. They're really trippy. Then I've got other stuff. What have I got? No Effects. Some more No Effects. So what I'm going to do is just show you some of the candy vinyl, and then I'll flip through the rest of the stuff. Like this one is that band Dream End. I ate myself bite by bite. And these ones are really cool because it's unique. It comes with this record, and you put the thing over the top. It's got slots in it. You set a cup on top of the record while it's spinning, and then you shine a light through this one spot of the slots, and you can see the guy. You look through the holes, and it looks like the guy's eating his own heart. It's pretty fucking cool. What else have we got over here? Yeah, the Hendrix Box Set. I've got the whole Grateful Dead set, which, you know, I don't have any candy vinyl, as they'd call it, for the Grateful Dead. It's mostly just all the regular albums. I've got, let's see, what we got up here? Lotus. This is an interesting one. It's a silk screened cover. It was limited edition, and I actually got number 225 of 225, so it was the very last one printed. It's called M. Ward Duet for Guitars number 2. Nothing special really about the vinyl itself. It's just that cover I always really liked. And Mike Gordon. Oh, this one's kind of interesting. 7 Fields of Aphelion Periphery. It comes with a full-size printed photo, and it's just a clear vinyl, and it's very. This is 11 of 500. What would you call it? Like, it's almost like soundscape type stuff. It's very, yeah, it's hard to define. So I've got Papadocio here. This was a great album too. Yeah, it's only a double, but it's triple gatefold. Really love this album. Picked it up at the show, I believe. And then recently, this is, I think, my most recent album, which is Microdosio. And they put out a whole album that was just kind of, you know, techno type, funky synthesizer stuff, and it's all based on different mushrooms. Got a Garicon and Cordyceps cubensis. It's really interesting. And then you've seen the Appleseed cast pile. I'm not going to go through any more of those, but they all are really beautiful. Over here, I've got my, let's see, I've got my Modest Mouse collection. Let me move up here. And I actually have the original Lonesome Crowded West and Moon in Antarctica. And actually, the very first Modest album, which is this one. long drive for someone with nothing to think about. And this has been out of print for a long time, and it's probably, I don't even know what it's worth now, but I won't sell it because I love my modest collection. There's ones like this that I just bought because it looked beautiful, so I don't even know who this band is. It's called Kind of Like Spitting, but when I looked at the LP, it was just neon. It's just beautiful. I liked it a lot. So I've listened to it, and actually the quality, yes, the quality of LPs really, it really does matter. I mean, when I'm sitting here listening to records, it's completely different than listening to, you know, MP3s or CDs, obviously. But I think what I'll do for now is I'll just grab this camera, take it off the tripod, and just show you this Hendrix one really quick. It's got kind of a neat glimmer, and all my Grateful Dead records, and then over here, you know, a variety of stuff. And that's about it. I figure I've shared just about everything I wanted to share. There's a bunch over here that are basically just my extras that aren't opened. Then this one I got from Prof the other day, which is actually signed. I got a couple copies and another Microdosio. I like to get backups. So that's about all my LPs that I really can share in a 10-minute time span. I've got this like Fish box set thing that's just got these little posters for every song on the album from the album Joy, and then it came with this booklet and CDs, and maybe one day I'll do a full in-depth of all my records. We'll see, but until then, that's what I got. Peace out. I'll talk to y'all later.
Purpose channels, purpose channels, purpose channels, purpose channels, purpose channels, purpose channels, purpose channels.
Thanks for coming to Carpo's channel, yo. Yeah.